Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the On the Diamond Into the Deep podcast. And welcome to episode 75. It's a big one. Today, we are going to talk about the Mariners dropping 3 out of 4 games in Houston. We'll talk about their offense in May. And then we will talk about the National Series. We'll talk about the bullpen and lineup. And then today we will also have about 40 minutes with Lyle Goldstein of the Marine Layer podcast. So thank you to Lyle for joining me, and we will get into that after today's brief starting of the episode. So without further ado, let's get into it. To begin, let's talk about the Astros series. Not fun to talk about. Just kind of a brutal series in general. I think the way I'm going to put it is that the Mariners beat themselves in a lot of ways. Errors during Brian Woo's start in the field. One of those was Woo, of course. There were also base running errors. You struck out a ton. Just a lot of just like knick-knack things that you can't really do when you're going to be playing close games. And the Mariners are going to be playing a lot of close games. And this is sort of a given that you have to play clean baseball, but it is important. You got to play clean baseball. You're now just 1.5 games up in the division. It is only May 26th. So division rankings don't really matter, but you do want to be ahead, of course. You were in close games in pretty much all of these series, except for the first one. And that one just sort of got away from you. And that one was close up until, I think, like the 4th inning. You just couldn't come up with a clutch hit. And we talked about this with Lyle during the interview that you will hear later. But no clutch hits, beating yourself defensively, just some small errors. But those are fixable. Those are going to be able to be cleaned up. So I think that's not a huge worry for me, at least. The worry is the offense. And it was apparent in this series. It's been apparent for really the month of May. If you want to talk about this series first, you want to just talk about strikeouts. 15 strikeouts Thursday, 10 Friday, 11 Saturday, and 10 Sunday. And double-digit strikeouts are not going to help you win games, especially when, like, a lot of when you're getting base runners on. I mean, you had 10 hits, 4 walks Thursday, 10 hits, 5 walks Friday. Saturday, Framber a little bit shut you down, 5 hits, 5 walks. That's still 10 base runners total. And then Sunday, 11 hits and a walk. You're getting base runners, and when you're striking out with base runners on, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for you to score runners because you're not putting the ball in play. And that's something we've seen in 2023. That's something we saw in 2024. And hopefully it's something that we don't continue to see in 2025. Hopefully you can strike out less, and strike out less specifically with runners on base. So that's something that I would watch for. Just in terms of going through the games quickly before we get into their stats in May, the offensive stats to be specific. Kirby had his season debut Thursday. The biggest thing is that he came out of it healthy. A few rocky innings. That's okay. He'll be on the mound next Wednesday, and we're excited to see that. The offense on Thursday, we're just going to give offensive stats for each of these games. 10 hits, 2 runs, 4 walks, 15 Ks. Friday, the one game the Mariners were able to win, and it was because they came up clutch. You had Cal Raleigh and Julio Rodriguez both have clutch moments in the 7th inning. Julio with a big game-tying RBI double, and then Cal Raleigh with a 2-run go-ahead homer that allowed the Mariners to take the lead and win. Leody Taveras had a 3-hit game that evening. He included a homer in those 3 hits, and Emerson Hancock went 6 innings, 9 hits, 3 runs, no walks, 3 Ks. Solid start for Hancock. Saturday, or let's talk about the offense Friday, I guess, first. 10 hits, 5 runs, 5 walks, 10 Ks. Saturday, offense first, 5 hits, 1 run, 5 walks, 11 Ks. You grounded out a lot against Framper, and we talked about it on, what was that, Thursday? That was the one thing you couldn't really do. You had to get the ball up in the air, and they weren't able to do it, and they paid for it, and they struggled, and that's okay. They're going to struggle. It's about, can you bounce back? And I think that's the worry with the offense, is that they're not bouncing back so far. There's a lot of season left, and it's not the biggest concern, but the concern is that the roster doesn't give you much hope in terms of, will they have some guys bounce back and be who they were in April? Because you've actually had really good months from some of the guys you expect to have good months in Randy Rosarena, Julio Rodriguez, and specifically Cal Raleigh. So can you get some bounce back months from guys like Jorge Polanco? And again, this is something we talked about on the interview with Lyle Goldstein. Saturday, again, 5 hits, 1 run, 5 walks, 11 strikeouts. Wu had a solid start. He had an error in the first inning that allowed a run. It was with 2 outs, so then the other run also scored on another error. You're really, like I said, you're beating yourself. 6 innings, 9 hits, 2 runs. They were both unearned. No walks, 5 Ks for Wu. Sunday, 11 hits, 3 runs, 1 walk, 10 Ks. You lost on a walk-off homer by, of course, Christian Walker. Luis Castillo went 6 innings, 9 hits, 3 runs, 1 walk, 6 Ks, and his velocity was up, which is a very good sign. It was up pretty significantly, actually. He averaged 96.4 miles an hour on the fastball, which is up 1.4 miles an hour from his season average, which is 95. The last thing I'll mention on this series is that Brash threw multiple times, which is good to see. Now, one of them was only a third of an inning, but to see him throw he threw Friday, and then he threw Sunday, which is good to see. And to see him getting closer and closer to being able to throw back-to-back days is a good sign. Again, the biggest thing is that the Mariners, they beat themselves, and that sucks. And to have that be how it happened is a little bit brutal. But that's okay. Can you bounce back? You're going to drop series here and there, and that's okay. Again, let's get into the offense, though. Offensive ranks in May is how we're going to start this, and we'll see where it goes from there. 16th in WRC plus at exactly 100. You've been a league average offense. 12th in home runs, 25. 21st in runs at 86. 21st in stolen bases at 12. 13th in walk percentage. 4th in strikeout percentage. 21st in ISO. 25th in average. 24th in on base. 24th in slug. 23rd in doubles. 23rd in OPS. 14th in barrel. 14th in hard hit. And if you take out stats from Cal, I mean, you're subtracting 7 home runs, so you're going from 25 to 18. 4 doubles are getting subtracted, so you're going from 30 to 26. 14 runs, so you're going from 86 to 62. No, 72. Oops, bad math. 17 RBIs for Cal 2, which we didn't mention RBIs, but that's another big chunk of runs that are going to be out of that total of 86. So the offense has been a struggle horse through May. And part of that is due to Jorge Polanco having a massive regression from April. And it's also due to the bottom of the lineup really just struggling. And that's something that you can't not expect, because the bottom of the lineup is not stacked in terms of names and guys that you expect to be super good. But it's frustrating and it's worrisome. And I think the 2 stats I want to look at are strikeout percentage and walk percentage. You look at walk percentage, you were best in the league in April. You were walking at an insane rate, which didn't seem like it was going to keep up. But you've fallen from 1st to 13th. You're now walking just 8.5% of the time, which is just not enough. You have to walk more than that when you're an offense that's going to strike out 4th most in baseball at 23.8%. So when those 2 things are going in tandem, when you're not walking as much and when you're striking out a whole lot and a lot more than you even were, that's when you're going to start to see problems, especially when you're not a big team that's going to be hitting for a ton of average. You're hitting just 233 in the month. When you're not also getting on base in terms of walks, that's when you're going to see struggles, and that's why the Mariners are seeing struggles. If you don't hit home runs, you're not going to win games. That's how this offense is, and that's how this offense has been built for a while. But it's not going to allow you to win games. And to win games, you're going to need to get on base and drive in runs. Even if that's not necessarily the identity, they need to be able to do that from time to time. And they can't even do that from time to time right now. So that right there is the worry. Getting into the National Series super briefly, they have two bats that you should be worried about. James Wood, CJ Abrams. You very likely know the names. James Wood, a 155 WRC plus 55% above league average there. 12.9% walk rate, 26% strikeout rate. The guy's going to strike out quite a bit, but he's also going to draw his walks. So you got to be in the zone a little bit. And you got to make sure you can keep him off the base paths. Him and Abrams they both have a little bit of speed. Wood is hitting 284, 375, 378, 542 with 13 home runs. Abrams, 145 WRC plus 6.2% walk rate, 18.6% strikeout rate, 294, 352, 531 with 8 homers. Outside of those two guys, the offense is not very good. They don't have another hitter above league average in terms of WRC plus. The other guy that maybe you'd be worried about is Nathaniel Lowe. And the worry there is that Nathaniel Lowe has been a good hitter in the past. Every season before this, he's been solid. And we know that he can be that because he was with Texas. This is a guy we've talked about with both Lyle and TJ in terms of as a potential acquisition at the trade deadline. Now, with the way he's hitting, a little bit scary there because he hasn't been the greatest hitter, but we know what he can do. And the thing for me there is, can you stop him from becoming that guy this series? We saw over the weekend, we talked about it Thursday, how Altuve, Christian Walker, and Yanier Diaz, the three of them were not doing great in their season prior to this series. Altuve specifically is the one I'm going to look at. And obviously Christian Walker had his walk-off home run on Sunday, so he obviously had his moment. But Altuve overall offensively had a very good series, and he's always going to be a pest for the Mariners, which is so annoying, and it's just frustrating. But on that, also, it's just like, can you stop him from getting to that point? And Altuve found form. He drank from the fountain of youth, and he was actually really solid, which that in of itself is frustrating and annoying. And can you stop Nathaniel Lowe from doing that? That's the question I'm going to ask. If you can stop him from doing that and you can stay away from Wood and Abrams, I think you're going to be in a pretty good spot. And this is a pretty big series. You got to win this series. It's a team you should win a series against before you head into another tough series with the Minnesota Twins, who have been red hot this next weekend. So Mariners got to win the series. That's first and foremost the priority for every single series. In terms of offensive ranks for the Nats, 18th in homers with 52, 15th in runs, 225, 19th in average, hitting 241 on the year, and 20th in on-base percentage, 17th in slugging, and 19th in WRC+. This is a below-average offense, and if you take those two guys at the top, it is a bad offense. The other part that's not very good is their bullpen. They are 29th in bullpen ERA at 6.13. They're 16th in strikeouts per 9, 29th in walks per 9. 13th in home runs per 9. They're going to give you free passes. Work your at-bats. Be the offense you were in April, where you're working your at-bats, and then you're making them pay after giving you free passes. That is an important thing. It's something the Mariners need to do. It's massive, and it's something they're going to be able to do against the bullpen. The key is going to be to get into the Nats bullpen, work it heavy, get good starts, and obviously you're going to need to hit home runs because that's what this team is built around. It's built to hit home runs. But if you can figure out ways to score runs, otherwise that's going to be a good sign. Now that's all for this portion of the episode. We are going to get into the interview with Lyle Goldstein now. So here's that. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the On the Diamond and Into the Deep podcast. As always, I am your host, Mahal, and today I am joined by Lyle Goldstein of the Marine Layer podcast. What's up, Lyle? How are you doing?
What's up, Mahal? I'm good. Thanks for letting me hop on. This is sick.
Yeah, glad to have you. So, tough weekend, to say the least, for the Mariners. If you have one takeaway from the 4 games, what's your takeaway?
I think it was that they lacked the big hit. They got it on Friday. Let's give them credit where credit's due, because Friday they got the big home run from Cal after the game-tying double from Julio. But Saturday and Sunday, where runs for the most part in those 2 games came at a premium, and every hit really ended up making a big difference, especially key hits with guys on base, they just didn't find a way to get the big hit over the final 2 games. So between going 0 for 6 with runners in scoring position on Sunday and leaving a couple of handfuls of guys on base over the final 2 games. I would say that's what it was. If they got one big hit over those final 2 games, we'd probably be talking about a series split.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that and just some like mental mistakes. You look at Saturday night and you have the first inning, obviously Brian Woo's error and then Rivas's error. And then you look at yesterday and JP not really hustling on that one play in the 8th inning, I believe. And it's just like you're beating yourself. And then also tons of strikeouts. I looked at it this morning. You had what was it, 15 on Thursday, 10 on Friday, 11 Saturday, and 10 on Sunday. And that's just not something you've seen. Well, you're looking at the Mariners offense in the month of May. What is the most worrying thing for you?
I think it's just how it's kind of gone the opposite direction of where it was in April. And look, what happened in April was not likely to sustain all year, and I don't think most people expected it to sustain all year. The fear was when it balances out, can it balance out to somewhere that's anywhere from league average to slightly above league average? Because if it does, that makes for a really good offensive ball club and a team that's obviously going to rely for the most part on its pitching staff to anchor them. In the month of May, as we sit here and record, the Mariners are 24th in team OPS for the month. They're 26th in team batting average for the month. They're 20th in runs scored for the month. And I think that's where the concerns lie. And you can zoom in the lens a little bit and focus on specific guys. But when you do that, it all collectively, I think, comes to the fact that, look, they're dealing with some injuries right now on offense with guys that aren't supposed to come back within the next, day, week, 2 weeks or so. They're guys that have some long-term injuries with Rayleigh, Robles, and even Ryan Bliss. So I think the concerns are where the offense has been the last few weeks and if it can fix itself to get closer to back to the form they were in April, or if this is going to continue long term. So if you want to talk about concerns, I think it's with what the offense has the potential to be going forward and if it can find a way to get, to find some true production again like they did in April.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there are reasons for optimism too, because there are very easy ways for this team to sort of improve. You look at a guy like Jorge Polanco, who had a complete 180 from what he was in April. And if he can just get back to sort of league average, I feel like all of a sudden you see this offense start to balance out because all of a sudden you're 4 or 5 guys deep at the start of your lineup instead of 2 or 3. For you, when you're looking at this offense, if there's one guy other than like the Cal, Julio, Randy's that you think is most important to this offense, who are you looking at?
I think you just said it. I think it's Jorge Polanco. And with that, the health of Jorge Polanco.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a coincidence that the offense was great in April when he was hitting and less than stellar in May when he wasn't. Now, you've gotten the absolute drastic 2 sides of Jorge Polanco in the first 2 months. Because in the first month, he essentially hit like Barry Bonds. And in the second month, here in May, he has an OPS under 500. Jorge Polanco doesn't have to be Barry Bonds all year. But if he can be the hitter that you paid him to be, which is above league average, hits fastballs hard, draws his walks, and serves a real factor in the middle of the order, especially if he can continue to hit in that 2-hole with some effectiveness, I think that's the guy that makes the biggest difference. Because when Polanco's hitting and when he's right, it lengthens the lineup a good amount. When he's right, you have JP, Polanco, Julio, Cal, Randy. You look at those 5 if everybody's right, and you say, yeah, that's a really strong 5. That's a 5 in a lineup that teams have to take extremely seriously and they know can do significant damage when they get their pitches and honestly when they're all rolling. When Polanco's not hitting, it feels like the lineup really significantly shrinks. Even though it's just the decreased production of one guy, to only go 4 deep with JP having more of an average month in May compared to what he did in April as well, I think it makes a drastic difference compared to what having a good Jorge Polanco can do when the lineup's not just stretched out, but stretched out with authority.
Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree. And even on that, I think you can make up for a little bit of Jorge Polanco's struggles if the bottom of the lineup was doing what it was doing in April, but you've also seen that start to tail off, and that's sort of where the struggles have come in. And one stat that I personally have looked at is walk percentage, and you looked at the offense in April, and they were best in the league, really, in walk percentage, and you've looked in May, and you're down to 13th, which is just not sustainable when that's what your offense has been doing best. And you put that in tandem with being the 4th worst in terms of strikeout percentage. and all of a sudden you have problems. Let's say Jorge Polanco doesn't really bounce back to league average or slightly above, and he's more like a 90, 95 WRC plus. Who are you looking at otherwise, whether that's in-house, in the minors, outside of house, maybe you're looking at a trade? Who are you looking at that could maybe make a difference in this lineup?
Whew. I mean, it's such a loaded question because there's so many different ways you can go with this.
For sure.
I'll start with guys in-house. And I think the guy that everybody's going to turn to, for good reasons, is probably Cole Young, because he's a guy that over the last 2-3 weeks has really lit the world on fire down in AAA. He's not striking out. He's drawing his walks like he's continued to do through his entirety of his minor league career. He's absolutely scorching the ball with authority right now. And I think it's a when, not if, for Cole Young's arrival in the big leagues. Should it be tomorrow? I would probably opt with caution a little bit on that, just because people have to have the expectation that when Cole Young comes up, he's not going to save the offense. He can't change the course of an entire season with what his offensive profile brings. He can absolutely augment it. He can absolutely help, and he can absolutely provide some real pop and some real effectiveness at the bottom of the order. But he's not going to Julio 180 an offense when he's red hot, like the way Julio Rodriguez can do. All that said, I think if Cole Young gets up and he really locks down the second base spot, that would do a lot for the Mariners, because that can either allow Dylan Moore and Leo Rivas and a couple others to move around to some other positions, like third base potentially, and it gives you one less thing to worry about at the trade deadline. So, look, there's plenty of trade deadline candidates we can get into in terms of people that can help solve an offense, and we can dive into it if you decide you want to. But in terms of the in-house options, I would say Cole Young's the easy guy to circle, because he's your prospect closest to the big leagues. He's been a top-end prospect for a long time, and he should absolutely help in a real role if he gets up to the big leagues and does what they expect him to do.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I've seen everybody on Twitter really calling for him tomorrow, but I agree that it's not really time for that.
Yeah, it's just, if you rush him, you run the risk of what you've done with some other prospects in the past, where you put a lot on them, maybe they're not fully ready, and then it can stunt their development a little bit. It's not the same example, because one guy's played way more minor league games than the other, but you just don't want to have what happened to Jared Kelenic happen to Cole Young, where you rush him up a little bit too soon and he gets overexposed and maybe he wasn't quite ready. Like, when Cole Young's fully ready, call him up by all means. Yeah. But once he's up, like, I want to see him up, and I don't want to see him go back. I want to see him be a contributor for a long time. So in order for him to do that, I'm okay with him getting another 3-4 weeks down in Tacoma, continuing to hit and make sure he's ready to go, rather than the risk of running him up too early.
Yeah, I agree for sure. If you were to look at it in 3 weeks and he's started to tail off a little bit, maybe that's hitting sort of 260 during that stretch. Where are you looking at him coming up? What timeline do you think for that?
Well, if he ends up struggling over the next couple of weeks, and again, he may not keep up the exact pace that he's been on the last couple of weeks, because he's just been so red hot. But if he tails off a little bit, then that probably goes back to the point that we were just making, in the sense of you don't want to run him up and call him up to the big leagues too early, because if it's just a flash in the pan and he proves that he needs more time, then fine. You gave him the reasonable amount of time to see if he was ready for the call up, and he ultimately proved that, yeah, maybe he needs a little bit more time, and then you don't rush him up. So if you do that, and in 3 weeks he's not hitting at the level that he's hitting right now, I would say instead of in mid-June for when you'd see him, maybe it's around the All-Star break. Maybe it could be August 1st, somewhere around there. I think we will see him in the big leagues at some point this year. But if he starts to tail off again, I would guess they'll give him an extra few weeks to make sure he's had enough at-bats where he's ready to go. So if you want me to predict a timeline, I would guess somewhere between the middle of July and early August.
Yeah, I agree for sure. Hitting the reverse, what do you think you would have to do to get a call-up sooner than that, like 3 weeks-ish?
I actually think there's a real chance in 3 weeks or so he's called up, because if that happens, then he's had the right amount of time where he's really hit for a prolonged sample. Yeah. So if he continues to draw his walks and he continues to do damage on mistake pitches, which he's proven he's done over the last couple of weeks, he's not a guy with like jaw-dropping power, but he started to prove that when you make a mistake to him, he's going to make you pay for it, and he's going to hit the ball out of the ballpark. He just did that here on Sunday on a mistake pitch over the weekend. I would say more of that. Just can really continue to do what he's doing, but approach is good, not getting away from himself, not chasing, continuing to draw walks. And I'll add one more big thing in here too. Be serviceable against lefties.
Yeah.
Cole Young's probably never going to mash lefties, but he really struggled with left-handed pitching over the first couple years of his minor league career. And now you look at 2024, and his OPS sits more in the 720 to 740 range. It's kind of varied back and forth a bit over the last few weeks. But if he does that and then continues to hit righties really well, that is perfectly fine. Again, Cole Young doesn't have to mash lefties, but as long as he proves that he's not a platoon bat, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree for sure. I'm excited to see the guy debut, and if he
I
were
can't
to
wait.
debut tomorrow, I'm gonna be there. I'll be excited. We'll see what happens. But
I'd be fired up if he debuts.
yeah,
I'm just thinking more about the long-term outlook of his. Yeah,
yeah,
look, if he gets called up for every good reason, people are going to be excited, and they should be because he can really help.
yeah. I agree for sure. And even just on a vibe standpoint, that would be freaking awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Heading into this homestand after a little bit of a brutal series in Houston. Moving forward, you mentioned it, but let's look at the trade deadline. If you have 1, 2, 3 targets that you're looking at, I know me and TJ talked about Nathaniel Lowe, who we'll see this week with Washington. Mm-hmm. Who are those targets for you?
So the 3 positions I think I've identified, and TJ would be in the same camp with this: first base, third base, reliever. And if you and TJ already talked about first base a little bit, and especially with somebody like Nathaniel Lowe, let's look at the bullpen a little bit, because there's a few names out there that I think are going to be intriguing, because my stance on this is the Mariners need at least one more leverage bullpen arm at the deadline. Yeah. Honestly, if not 2, because you want to look at what happened last year. If they had Matt Brash all year last year, we may be sitting here talking about how they made the playoffs in 24. If you had Matt Brash and healthy Gabe Spire all year last year, I think we're almost definitely talking about them being in the playoffs in 2024. For as much focus as the offense got and all the struggles they had last year, which was all warranted conversation, the bullpen was better than it was last year. They're probably still in the playoffs. And there is no such thing as having too many leverage bullpen arms and too many really good bullpen arms come October, because ultimately, pitching usually gets you through the postseason, especially bullpen pitching, because oftentimes starters get knocked out of games early in the postseason. So what could the Mariners do in terms of some bullpen arms that could help them down the stretch? There's a few you could highlight. Ryan Helsley from the Cardinals is certainly one who's been one of the best relievers in baseball and was for about a 3-year stretch. This year he's been a little more up and down. I would still take him in a heartbeat if I were the Mariners. I'd say he's one. I would look at Kyle Finnegan from the Nationals, who's had a really good year and has some real swing and miss stuff in his own game. And maybe this final one's a slight wild card. I don't really think it is, because the Rays are not playing well, and the Mariners and Rays make trades all the time. But how about Pete Fairbanks? How electric would that guy be if you put him in the back end of this bullpen unit and had him throwing in leverage late in games? There's other bullpen arms that'll pop up over time this year and could be talked about as we get closer to the end of July. But if you want a couple names in the bullpen, I would look at those. I'll say Ryan Helsley. I'll say Pete Fairbanks. I'll say Kyle Finnegan.
Yeah, I like it. I was going to say Fairbanks for sure. And the thing I like about all 3 of those guys is that you can also pair them with a bat from each of those teams. That is very interesting. I mean, you look at the Rays, you got the Yandy Diaz's of the world, who's had a little bit of an off year compared to what he's done. But also you got Brandon Lau there, among other guys. You look at the Nationals, we mentioned Nathaniel Lowe. You could go that route. You fill first base for this year, next year. Or you look at a guy like Ryan Helsley, and you could maybe go do a huge blockbuster like a Brendan Donovan, or even a Nolan Arenado, someone a little bit that's going to be expensive, but not prospect expensive in the same way. And I think that's something that will be interesting to see. Not that you see that happen often, but I think that would be an interesting thing. Of those packages, which one do you like the best?
So let's see. It would be Nathaniel Lowe and Kyle Finnegan, option A. Option B is Pete Fairbanks and let's say Brandon Lau.
Yep.
And then option C would be Ryan Helsley and you want to say Brendan Donovan?
Let's say Donovan, but include price in this answer for sure.
Okay. Yeah, like the reason I'd probably say Donovan over Arenado is one, not just the money, but 2, since Arenado has that no trade clause, he can reject trades, kind of like he did to Houston. And if he's rejecting trades to Houston, I can't exactly imagine the guy is jumping at the bit to play in Seattle. So let's use Donovan instead. I would say of the three, well, it's a good question. And it's a loaded question because there's some layers to it. Are
Yeah.
you thinking about putting the absolute best roster on the field in 2025, trying to win the World Series where prospects don't come into account? Or are you factoring in the type of prospects you'd have to give up?
I'm going to say let's factor in the prospects because otherwise I think the answer is pretty easily Helsley and Donovan, just because
Okay.
that's easily the best duo. But if you include prospect capital, where are you going?
Yeah. Okay. So if you include that into it, because you're right, like to get multiple years of control of Brendan Donovan, who's been awesome this year and can
Yeah.
play all these different positions, yeah, that'd be great. Of the others, I would probably go with the Fairbanks and Brandon Lau route because the Mariners and Rays have made plenty of trades and the teams know each other well and you know, they have been prone to get things done in the past with a variety of trades, something as recently as Randy Arozarena. But look, Brandon Lau can play second base and he can play some outfield. Mostly he's a second baseman. And it makes it a little bit interesting because then what happens with Cole Young? I'm just thinking this through. Like I'm
Yeah.
talking it through out loud as we think through it. Because if Brandon Lau could play third base, that would be pretty helpful to this team. But I'm just looking right now, like how much third base has Brandon Lau played in his career? Oh, he's actually never done it. So that might be hard to ask Brandon Lau to play third base when he's never done it.
I mean, the
Yeah,
thing he has done a little bit is played a little bit of outfield, but
right,
not since 22, it looks like.
right,
And that was only
right,
a
right.
game.
The other side to it is Pete Fairbanks has been really good. So you're talking about
Yeah.
maybe the best reliever of the bunch, especially with Helsley struggling this year. You get the best reliever in that package, but then you have to do maneuvering on your infield with who goes where and can Brandon Lau fit in the same infield as Cole Young? Maybe Lau could play some first base. He's done it at points in his career, not a ton, but as I just sit here and look through his fielding logs over the course of his big league tenure, he's done it like a tiny little bit. Again, it's not a lot, but it's a little. I want to make sure I have the amount of games right as we're just sitting here talking through the
Yeah. It looks like
ideas.
he played 13 games just last year. So,
Well, which to be fair, Jorge Polanco had played less than 20 career games at third base, and the Mariners signed him to play third base. So, all right, if we're going to talk that through, especially with Nathaniel Lowe struggling this year, and
yeah.
maybe back up, but with him struggling this year and Fairbanks probably being the best reliever of the three, let's say that. Let's say you manage a package trade to get Pete Fairbanks, to get Brandon Lau. You can put Lau at first. Cole Young can play second. You could have Dylan Moore and some combination of then either Ben Williamson, Leo Rivas, etc. play some third base. And that feels like a more competitive roster and a more competitive infield than you're running out there right now.
Yeah.
And then you know what? Then you have Rowdy Tellez play in different spots, whether he comes off the bench or he mixes in at DH. If Jorge Polanco still can't hit against, well, never mind. I was going to say left-handed pitching, but Rowdy doesn't play a ton against lefties either. Point being, like Rowdy can be more of a bench bat, and he can give you more options late in games or on certain days where guys need days off, etc. Where then Lau can factor in more to being an everyday guy, and then you get the best reliever of the bunch in Fairbanks.
Yeah, I think the question I'd have is how do you fit a Jorge Polanco who can really only hit lefties, a Cole Young, hopefully he's up by then, a Brandon Lau, and a Rowdy Tellez all on the roster when they're all left-handed bats and sort of all play the same two positions?
Yeah, so that makes it very left-handed heavy. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that would be a problem you'd run into here with Nathaniel Lowe also, who's a left-handed
Right.
bat. And you'd have to run him out there with Rowdy and with Cole Young. Sometimes teams just deal with that. I will say the Astros are an extremely right-handed heavy team right now. We saw it this weekend. So could the Mariners factor that into some of the decisions they make through trades? Sure. I'm not saying it would play no factor. But the Mariners may also look in the mirror and say, we've just got to get the best players that we can on this roster and figure out the lefty-righty stuff as we go on. Brandon Lau has not been over the moon good this year, but he's been productive enough where I think he warrants at least a look and saying, all right, can he help us?
Yeah, I agree for sure. And I think I would rather have them be a little bit more left-handed hitter heavy than right-handed hitter heavy, especially considering T-Mobile Park, just because left-handed hitters tend to hit better there.
And the issue is, again, maybe there's people listening that are not jumping at the bit for Brandon Lau just because, again, he's been fine this year. He has not been over the top great. The issue is this market is not going to be loaded with hitters. At least that's how it feels right now. Your options for bats you can trade for feel a little bit limited. Could Bo Bichette be available on a trade? Maybe, if the Blue Jays keep winning. Issue is, I don't think the Mariners are going to give up the package for him, and he feels a little bit like a Dodger to me, unfortunately. If Bo Bichette's going to go anywhere, that's where it feels like he's going to go with the deadline.
Yeah.
So, aside from Bichette, who may not even get traded, it's just not a packed deadline full with bats, which is too bad because the Mariners are going to really have to find a way to find some bats, and maybe more guys will pop up as time goes on. But yeah, you know what? One more team we could throw out there if you want to talk about trade packages, and
sure.
I'm surprised it took us this long to get here, is probably the Orioles. Like, could you go trade for Ryan O'Hearn? Talk about a guy that's been phenomenal at the plate this year. And that would make you a little more balanced when we talk through this left-right thing, because O'Hearn's a righty. He absolutely has dominated at the plate this year.
Yeah.
He can absolutely hit against left-handed pitching, which if you end up moving on from Solano, he slides right in because he just fills that role where maybe you play him more than just as a platoon guy against lefties, but he can certainly play every time there's a lefty on the mound, and he fills a first base need, and maybe the Mariners could get a bullpen arm within that as well. I don't think it would be Felix Bautista because he's unfortunately got way too much club control where he costs way too much, but maybe you could get O'Hearn from the Orioles and you could get a reliever from somewhere else. Maybe you work out a trade with the Rays to get Fairbanks alone.
Yeah, and I do like that idea, and I think a right-handed hitting first baseman is definitely an attractive thing, especially with what Rowdy's done the past. Well, I mean, really the whole year, but especially the past month. And I think a reliever is definitely an important piece because when I'm looking at this Mariners team, obviously you have the starting pitching. The question is, can you get at least one of the bullpen or the lineup to be good? And I think if you can have two of those things, you're hopefully a playoff team. We've seen the past 2 years that obviously they haven't really had the offense either year, but also the bullpen struggled a little bit, specifically last year, especially last year. And I look at it and I think we mentioned it earlier, but you have Matt Brash, you have Gabe Spire, you're probably a playoff team last year. Well, you're looking towards the playoff, shifting gears a little bit. In the AL West and in the American League, what teams scare you the most, if anyone?
It's funny, not a lot of them do.
Yeah.
I think the American League is really bad this year, and the American League West specifically is even worse. If you want to pick a team of the four others in the American League West that probably scares me the most, I mean, I guess I'd say it's Texas, but they just lost to the White Sox. You can argue the Astros, sure, because they have the second best record in the American League West right now, but they've had a bunch of injuries. Altuve looks like he's over the hill. Jordan's on the IL, and he has not hit well. And even in their rotation, I get you have a guy that's right in the thick of the Cy Young race at Hunter Brown, but you get past Brown and Framber Valdez, they are banged up. I know they just got Lance McCullers back. He has not looked sharp at all, which doesn't really shock me as he's getting up there in age and didn't pitch for a better part of 2 years.
Yeah.
So Arrighetti just goes down. They don't have Christian Javier back. They don't have Luis Garcia back. There's
Ronel Blanco as well.
Who is it?
Blanco just went down with the elbow.
Yeah, so he just like who was awesome for them last year. That Astros team does not scare me because again, they don't have the dudes in the rotation this year, and you're seeing the effects of not having Kyle Tucker and Alex Bregman. It is a different team, and not in a good way. So if you want me to pick one team that I would say still jumps out to me the most, it would be the Rangers, because the Rangers have pitched incredibly well in their rotation. When you look at a guy like DeGrom getting back to close to peak DeGrom, you have Nathan Eovaldi pitching unbelievably. You have Tyler Mahle pitching unbelievably. You have Jack Leiter, who started to show flashes of the number 2 pick that he was drafted to be. You know, the Rangers go close to 4 or 5 deep in that rotation. And look, Kumar Rocker's only made a handful of starts in his big league career, but once he comes back from injury, he's your 5 starter. That's a good rotation. Do the Rangers ultimately scare me a ton? No, they don't. And they have a lot of guys not playing well. On paper, who would I say provides the most threat? Probably the Rangers, just because of the way they've pitched.
Yeah, I agree. I also think the Astros do have a little bit of fear just because they are the Astros and they are so experienced and have done it for so long. But I mean, it's like you said, you look at their team and like their roster's not the same. They have a lot of guys down, and a lot of those injuries are like very up in the air on when they're going to come back. I was looking at just Jordan before the series because he's been out with a hand injury that sounds very weird. It's like not really known what it is, but he's kind of just out until he's ready, and he can't even swing off of a tee yet without some pain in his hand. So I think that in of itself doesn't scare me a whole lot about the Astros.
Right. I mean, around the rest of the American League, obviously you can look at the Yankees a little bit as a team that obviously just went to the World Series last year, and they'll provide fear into anybody just because of what they can do offensively. I don't think they're a world beater. I don't think they're a powerhouse by any means, but you have to take them seriously come October. I just don't think the difference between the Mariners and Yankees is that significant.
Right.
I think the big difference is the Yankees have the best player in the world, arguably, right now, and the Mariners don't have that guy. So that makes a difference. And then the Tigers, to be fair to the Tigers, like, they have really pitched this year. Obviously, Tarek Skubal is amazing. Reese Olson's been great. Casey Mize has been sharp. Like, they've had guys that have really kind of stepped into a nice role for them. So the Tigers playing like the Tigers, obviously, I mean, the Tigers playing as well as they are right now, you got to take note of it because they've been the best team in the American League by record.
Sure.
And any team that has to go up against Tarek Skubal twice in a playoff series, it's not going to be easy.
Mm-mm.
But it still comes back to the idea that I don't look at the Tigers and say this team is all world scary. Is the resurgence of Javi Baez a cool story? Sure. Outfielder Javi Baez, might I add. Like, is that a cool story? And is that helping the Tigers? Definitely. Is Spencer Torkelson's emergence helping them? Definitely. I just don't look at that. Like, is Gleyber Torres playing well helping? For sure. I still just don't look at them in the same light as, say, if you were in the National League playing the Padres or the Phillies or the Dodgers or even the Braves once, now with Ronald Acuna back and Spencer Strider back and or on his way back, all those guys. It's not the same. The National League is so much tougher than the American League these days. Yeah. So the Mariners get in. They just find a way to get into the field. You just don't know what they can do with that rotation and if they add to their bullpen.
Yeah. I mean, the Tigers, the interesting thing with them is that it feels like everybody's having a great year. Just looking at WRC pluses of their lineup, they got 2 guys under 100. Everyone else, the lowest is 118, which is just wild.
Look, like, they're not going to be an easy out. When you're going through a lineup these days of Torque, who's hitting great, obviously we know what Kerry Carpenter can do. We know what Riley Green can do. We've seen Javi Baez have a resurgence. We've seen Gleyber Torres play well. They're a good team. I just don't know if I look at them the same way I look at some of these NL teams. Not as if the Mariners cannot hang around with them, that sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think it would be a great series to watch those two teams play against each other, but the Mariners also have had struggles against the Tigers, which for me is a little bit of a worry.
That is a good point. Yes, they have.
And AL Central teams kind of in general, just because they're like these scrappy teams that sort of just throw hits together, and the Mariners tend to not do well against those teams. Mm-hmm. But nobody's really scary, to your point.
Right.
Except for the National League, obviously, but you'd have to do some special stuff to get to that point.
Sure. You'd have to do something that your franchise has never done before, aka make the World Series.
Yeah, and something that your franchise has barely done over the past 20 years in making the playoffs, which hopefully they can do. Yeah. Just shifting gears for this last 10 minutes-ish. For you with the Marine Layer podcast, obviously you guys have grown quite a bit. If you're looking at from before you really grew and became what you guys have been, what do you think the biggest thing in sort of your growth has been?
I hope I give different answers than TJ on this, but the biggest thing I think with anybody that wants to get into podcasting or get into social media content creation is you have to be consistent with it. You have to be on top of it. So when we started our podcast, we said, look, if we're going to start, we want to make sure we're going to take it seriously. And we want to make sure that we're not going to be one of those podcasts who, and it happens out there, whether it's you have friends out there that have started podcasts, or maybe you're somebody listening to this that's tried to start a podcast on your own, or have heard a story about somebody trying to start a podcast where you put time into thinking of the name, and then you find recording equipment, and you figure out what you're going to want to talk about on the first episode, and you got to figure out a logo and all these different things. And then after 2 or 3 episodes, you're like, well, I've got a scheduling conflict this week and it's going to be hard to record. So you let one go by the wayside. Next thing you know, you let a couple go by the wayside. And by the end, it's kind of fizzled out. We always said, if we're going to start, we want to try to make something of it. We said we want to post a lot on social media. We want to try to consistently put up episodes. We don't want to miss shows. We want to try to get good guests. So I would say all that factoring into kind of my main point here is if you stay consistent with it, it builds up the trust of your listeners. It builds up the trust of your followers. They know that they're going to see content from you on a regular basis. And that keeps them around for a much longer period of time and keeps them coming back listening. So I would say a lot of things have been really cool to see come into fruition for both TJ and I in the first 2-ish years of doing this so far. But if we weren't consistently consistent with the way we kind of go about doing it, I don't think we could have gotten anywhere near to as close as where we've gotten to this point because like consistency is just such a key thing. Again, if like not even just from posting content wise, but like from a mental side too. Like if you have the idea that there's an out that, okay, we can just skip it this week, that's an easy way to get lazy sometimes, where if like we are doing this and this is in our schedule, we're going to do it. And we like, it's not an if, it's a when, then it's easy to stay on top of it. I think the two of us have done a good job of holding each other accountable with that stuff too.
Yeah, for sure. TJ said the exact same thing, which is awesome.
Oh, did he?
Can see, yeah.
All right, let me throw one other thing in there then, so I don't give the exact same answer. I think creativity is a big thing.
Yeah.
How do you stand out in your niche or in your world or in like whatever you're opting to kind of shift your podcast around? And we tried to do some things that a lot of people weren't doing. Like there wasn't a ton of social media stuff out there about the Mariners once we started. And it feels like to us that we ended up tapping into like a part of the market that wasn't being tapped into enough before. And between that and between trying to get really creative with some ideas where it wasn't just podcast clips we were posting, but we got to, and get to, plural to this day, go interview players and go interview fans doing man on the street stuff. And sometimes we'll do these stupid little skits that we'll post every now and then, or we'll do these quick reactions to videos, to news. Again, like reporters write their stories, right? And people that consume Mariners information or media through just written content will go read the stories. But I mean, as you know, like you're in high school, you know how Gen Z kind of operates and how they think. People's attention spans are short. A lot of people, whether it's your age or even my age in their mid-20s, like a lot of people aren't going to stop and read an article. But people will sit for 30 to 60 seconds and listen to something on their phone on social media. So almost our version of like doing a lot of these recaps is like a lot of times after series, we'll do a reaction recapping what happened in the series where, it's not just us saying, okay, here they lost 6-5 and then they lost 4-3. Like, no, we'll put some personality into it, or we'll add our opinions about like Julio just went off in this series and again, like Logan Gilbert just absolutely bodied the Astros or whatever. Like, we put our own spin on it where it's not just news, but the creativity side of it, again, is people get to see more of us and like us reacting probably in a similar fashion to how a lot of fans feel. And from some of the feedback we've gotten, that seems to be relatable to people. And like when a trade happens, instead of writing an article about it, we'll do a podcast about it and we'll do a quick post on social media about it because that's how a lot of people consume their news these days. So I would say, again, that part of that goes to consistency too, but the creativity of doing a lot of different things, I'd say especially like a lot of the player and fan interviews we've done on social media have helped us stand out in a bit of a way and do some things that other people weren't doing. And it's been really fun.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's how I found you guys originally, was through, I think, TikTok probably around All-Star Break 2023. So definitely can say that is something for sure. And I think finding your niche obviously is very important. And for you, as you look towards the future with Marine Layer stuff around that, what is like a future goal of yours for the podcast, for your career, stuff like that?
Man, there's so many different ways that like it could go. What's crazy is what could end up being the dream may not even exist yet, which sounds funny to say, but from how much media changes constantly these days, there is a world where our dream scenario may not yet even exist, and it will in 5 years. Like, for example, when TJ and I were at ASU and we would talk about the Mariners nonstop, all this short form content creation and like, being a social media creator and like a real podcaster, it wasn't as prevalent back then. Like podcasts existed, but you didn't see people truly building brands and building up audiences through social media. But I'd say around the time that COVID happened, that's when you started to see a lot of that really take its trend and be more front facing. So I think if you would ask TJ and I when we were in college about like what our dream scenario was, like, obviously we hadn't started the podcast back then, but like to think of doing this, like it didn't even exist back in 2018, 2019, 2020, etc. So for all I know, maybe in 5 years, it's a scenario that will come to fruition within, within time, within time down the road. But if you're going to ask me like, what would be a dream scenario in terms of what you guys could do now? I would say one, this all keeps building up and it just gets, it gets to the point where audience continues to grow, brand continues to grow, because we don't want to stop doing it. Like we basically said at this point, we will continue to do it until people don't want to listen anymore. So as long as people are still having interest in listening and enjoy it, we'll keep doing it. But I would say along with that, to get some more opportunities off of that, to it's funny because like we've gotten a lot of cool ones between being on 710 and being on local TV to talk about the Mariners has been awesome. But like maybe some of these other national media outlets that talk a lot of baseball, if we got opportunities through there to, be a regular and talk not just Mariners, but like national baseball too, which is another reason TJ and I started a national page of ours recently to try to not just be the guys that only talk about the Mariners, but show, we can talk about other things too and talk about more national baseball stuff. I think that's where it really goes to. If you want the concrete answer, I think in a perfect world, we continue to do this long term. We continue to, stay in the baseball media, social media content space long term, but build out some niche or some role where we continue to keep all our Seattle roots and talk about the Mariners constantly, but also find opportunities to talk baseball nationally too. Hopefully one day on a large scale where you get a lot of eyeballs on you and people turn to you. So I would say something like that, where you're doing a lot of national, like a lot of baseball content from from a couple of different perspectives, and you enjoy yourself doing it. Cause like, that's what drove us to start this all, is like, we love it. Like underneath it all, or like at the core of it all, we love doing it. And that's why we're in the space that we're in, because we love talking about baseball. So we'd love to do it forever if we can.
Yeah. I mean, what you just said reminds me a little bit of John Boy Media and sort of a West Coast John Boy Media, which would be dope in of itself.
Sure. That'd be great. I don't know if we'll end up starting that on our own or not. That sounds like a tough thing to build up. But again, like if we were to, again, like maybe get involved with a company or space, or get opportunities at a company or space where like, we got to talk baseball on those type of platforms, that'd be awesome. So I guess we'll see what it all looks like in, years, months down the road, because you just never know with the way media changes.
Yeah, for sure. One last question, a little bit of a fun one to combine sort of everything. For you as a Mariners fan, what has been, other than the Cal Raleigh homer, what has been your favorite moment for the Mariners? Sort of favorite Mariners memory?
I mean, it's funny because it was a loss, but it has to be the 18-inning playoff game, which as like devastating as it was and as agonizing as it was, watching through the 9th to the 10th to the 11th to the 12th to the 18th, all the way through, and them not scoring a run, getting to be at that game, because TJ and I were both there. It was actually right before we ever started the podcast. We were there like together with a couple of our other friends, but it was before the Marine Layer Pod had ever become a thing. And to just see what an environment looks like for playoff baseball in Seattle, where you have 50,000 people losing their minds, and it's loud, and it's this ridiculously tight, intense game, and you see what like peak baseball in Seattle looks like, and to be around just a raucous environment of all these diehard fans. Yeah, it was sick. And I want more of that, which is I think why everybody's itching to see them get back to the postseason and put together a real competitive roster so badly, because that was so fun. Like, I want to see more of that. So I would say my favorite memory is, after all these years of growing up throughout my life, not getting to see him play in a playoff game, to finally get to experience it at home was awesome. So I would say that was it.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I'm getting chills just thinking about it.
Were you there?
I was there. I was in right field. Yeah.
Oh,
just
sick.
Crazy moment.
Crazy.
Wild. Hopefully we can see it again soon.
Man, I hope so. That'd be awesome.
just the passion with that crowd was so wild.
Nobody sat down for 18 innings. Like, people were on their feet for 5-6 hours straight. It was wild.
Yeah, and just loud, like so loud.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember how that day was like the smoke was all in the area, and like you could barely even like use your voice.
Oh, it was weird. It was like 80 degrees in the middle of October too. That was the year summer started really late. It didn't get warm till mid to end of July, and then it carried over through October basically.
So wild.
It's crazy. Well,
thank you so much, Lyle. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Anything else for you before you head out?
I think that's just about it. This has been a blast, Mahal. Like, keep doing your thing. Keep plugging away. It's awesome what you're doing, and had a blast talking with you.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Lyle.